Hello and welcome. Greetings to artists and creators all over the world. I am Emtat, an artist and researcher. I will be creating a beautiful artwork from the fibers of the Posidonia ochika marine plant. These fibers are remnants of the Posidonia marine plant, which inhabits the Mediterranean Sea. This plant is vital to the sea, especially for marine life. So now we want to create a beautiful artwork using these fibers. Hello. Now we will begin the work. The beautiful thing about these fibers is that these fibers have a very refreshing smell, and they never give off an unpleasant smell. They eliminate mold, and this is the secret of these fibers. Collecting these fibers and bringing them home will make a beautiful sculpture, like this one, but covered in clay. I made this sculpture. It's called an old man, 70,000 years old, holding an egg from his wife laid 10,000 years ago, about to hatch. By the way, the Posidonia plant is considered the oldest living organism on Earth, according to marine biologists. Now we will collect these fibers. As you can see, these fibers are in the form of balls like this, varying in size. Some are the size of a palm, and the smallest are the size of a cherry. By the way, the age of these fibers can sometimes reach hundreds of years, meaning we are working with a very ancient material. And not only that, but these fibers will remain for 100 years as they are, with the same quality and color, while preserving the statue that we will make. Now we will form the structure of the statue. We will use metal wires. We will tie the wires and determine the length. After that, we will insert these fiber balls into these wires to form the muscles of the statue. Now, as you can see, we have finished passing the fiber balls through the metal wire frame. The statue will look like this, as you can see. We will place the statue on a wooden base, and we will fix the metal wires which protrude from the statue's foot with the nails in the wooden base, so that the statue is firmly fixed to the base, which will make the sculpting process easier for us. The secret to this work lies in covering the sculpture with an adhesive. We must do this to strengthen the sculpture and make the spheres stick together, thus reinforcing the sculpture's structure. I also advise using an environmentally friendly water-based adhesive, not an oil-based glue, because the fibers are water-based and therefore respond well to it. These fibers can be carved and shaped. They have a strong structure. Use glue for carving or a knife or anything suitable for the carving process. However, in this work, we only want to shape the anatomical structure of the statue, and then we will use clay for sculpting. During the period of work and formation, we can think of a suitable idea for this artwork. The idea can also change as we continue working. How should the statue be positioned? What is the subject we want to bring out? What is the story of this work? All of that must be there and be, so that the work has creativity and a story behind it, bringing the artist out into the world of inspiration, the world of ecstasy in art. That is the energy that the true artist drinks. This statue brought back an old memory I had forgotten, but this snapshot revived it as if I were seeing it with my own eyes. I remember 1998. I was an artist trying to make a living. I would stand in the streets of Valletta, Malta with an easel, a pile of papers, and a small old chair, looking for someone to draw. This was due to my desperate need for money and to stay in Malta. My situation in my country was dire. I had left to escape the oppression and persecution of the state and its authorities. They had put my name on a watch list because of my political affiliations and the suspicions surrounding me. I didn't like the regime in my country. I disagreed with its ideology and its repressive policies. I remember when I left, before boarding the ship bound for Malta, I was stopped, searched, and prevented from boarding. Then I was interrogated. I remember when the security investigator was questioning me, he took a storybook out of my bag and asked me, Valley of Terror, which was the title of the book. Then he asked me, what do you mean by Valley of Terror? I replied that it was a story I had bought from the library to read in my free time. He then asked me what I meant by Valley of Terror. I told him it was the title of the story and that I hadn't written it, the author had chosen it. He began flipping through the pages and asked me why I had chosen this story and this title. I couldn't answer and began to stammer. Then I said, I thought it was a horror story, and I like horror stories. The detective put the storybook aside and began searching the bag, taking out everything inside. He found nothing but clothes, drawing paper, and paints. He looked at me and said, I know you're an artist. I know when you were born and where you live. Then he asked me, when will you be coming back here? I replied, I don't know, maybe in 2 weeks. I'm going on vacation. He told me to put my things in my bag and hurry to the ship. Then he left with someone who had been lying with me, heading towards the ship to catch up with him before it set sail. I laid there as if I were heading towards paradise and salvation. My heart was pounding, and I kept asking myself, have I really survived? When I arrived in Malta, I realized how lucky I was and how I had miraculously survived. Malta completely enchanted me. However, I didn't have enough money, so I decided to work, knowing all along that I could never go back. Days went by, some good and some bad, but I couldn't find a proper job. That's when I started drawing on the street. I found an old chair discarded on the sidewalk, and I had my easel, some paper, and colored pencils. I would stand there, offering to draw people for 2 francs. But because I wasn't in good physical shape, hardly anyone sat for a portrait. The money wasn't enough to survive. There were times I went 2 days or more without food, until my clothes no longer fit and hung loosely on my frame. My shoes were torn and my hair grew long. I remember being so famished that I decided to steal bread just to stay alive. I went to a bakery, waited for the baker to turn his back, and snatched a large loaf. It was like a thick, heavy ball. I began devouring it instantly. Honestly, I had never tasted anything so plain. It's so incredibly delicious. I can still taste it to this day. On another day, the hunger gnawed at me again. Without thinking, I headed toward the bakery, though I was trembling with fear. I thought, what if he catches me this time? But hunger was stronger than fear. Inside, I saw a single loaf tucked in a corner. This is my chance, I thought. As soon as the baker turned around, I grabbed it and hurried out. But as I hurried away, I felt a sharp sting of guilt. This wasn't right. I was hurting the baker, a man who might have a family to feed. I turned back, walked into the shop, and placed the loaf on the table in front of him. I apologized, saying, "Hunger drove me to steal. Please forgive me." The baker looked at me and said, "Take it. Don't worry. Come back every day and take a loaf for free." I looked at him, nodded, and took the bread. As I walked out, I felt a deep sense of respect for his nobility and manhood. I have never forgotten him. Things took a turn for the worse. I could no longer carry on. With no shelter and no food, the thought of returning home began to haunt me. I was battling myself and my fears, hoping that if I stayed patient, a solution might appear. But there was an overwhelming anxiety. If I went back, I might be imprisoned. After 6 months in Valletta, I went down to the old harbor and headed toward the ship bound for my country. I was terrified. I felt as though I was walking back into the heart of horror. At the harbor, I spotted 2 men I had frequently seen around Malta. I instantly realized they were security agents from my home country. A Maltese policeman passed by. In a sudden burst of courage, I stopped him. Back then, I didn't even know the term political asylum. I whispered in his ear in Maltese, "Can you help me? Things are not safe for me in my country, and I am being forced back. I will be arrested because of political differences. Please help me." The officer looked at me and said, "Don't worry, give me your passport." I handed it over, trembling with fear. I stood my ground while the 2 agents stared at me, whispering tensely to each other. Moments later, the officer returned with 2 other policemen. He approached me with a heavy look, his head slightly bowed, and said, "Don't worry, we won't tell your country's agents about your asylum request. Take your passport and board the ship." I looked at him, desperate for assurance. "Are you sure you won't tell them?" "Yes," he replied. "Go." As I stepped onto the ship, I realized I had walked straight into a trap. I was returning to the enemy's stronghold. Upon my arrival, the interrogator was already waiting for me. I was arrested immediately. I spent many long years in prison, but strangely, I felt a sense of peace inside my solitary cell. The very thing I had feared for so long had finally happened. I was in the middle of it. For 5 years in solitary confinement, I was internally free. I drew and I wrote. When I was finally released after 7 years, the surveillance was tighter than ever. Looking back, that moment in Valletta, as I stood on the cobblestone street waiting to draw someone, was a crossroads filled with confusion, fear, hope, hunger, and sighs.